Let this be a reminder that there really are monsters out there. In 2007, a woman living right near a prison in California got home late one night and went right to bed. Around midnight, she woke up to footsteps on her first floor, assumed it was her roommate, so she goes downstairs to say hi. She yells out to her roommate, who doesn't say anything, and then in walks this giant man who she doesn't recognize. She runs upstairs, jumps in her closet into the crawl space, and hides. As she's helplessly tucked away in this little crawl space, trying not to make any sound, all she hears is this giant man sprinting around her house, running into walls, flipping furniture, and screaming in frustration because he can't find her. Finally, after several hours, she slowly opens the crawl space back up, crawls out, and gets her phone off the nightstand and calls police. As she's telling the police her story, she describes the person who had broken in, and they stop her and say, "Ma'am, go back in the crawl space and stay there. We'll be there as soon as we can." It turned out a 6'11" convicted murderer had escaped the prison and was still on the loose. This is why you should always sprint up your stairs at night. In 2018, a boy was up late gaming in his basement when he decided to go to bed. The basement's only light was controlled by a pull chain at the foot of the stairs, which meant after he pulled it, he'd be downstairs in darkness, so he would sprint up the stairs. Because everybody knows if you're not fast enough, this guy'll get you. So he did just that, and he made it upstairs safely when he realized he had forgotten his phone in the basement. So he took a deep breath and headed right back down. This is why you should always trust your gut. In the 1970s, a young couple decided to go for a late night hike in the woods. A couple minutes into their walk, and the man remembers thinking something's not right. He tells his girlfriend, but they just decide to ignore it and keep going, until he steps on something that felt really soft, like it was alive. Before he has a chance to see what he stepped on, they hear all this rustling in the bushes next to them and they bolt. Years later, that couple turns on the TV and a death row inmate who's about to be executed is being interviewed. And they ask him, "Was there ever a time that you were almost caught red-handed?" He responded, "Yes, one time. I was in the woods and a couple walked through and the man actually stepped on the body of a girl I had just killed. I was hiding in the bushes just a few feet away. They didn't see me." That couple had run into one of the worst serial killers of all time, Ted Bundy. This is why you should always look under the toilet seat before you sit down. In 2003, over a 5-day period in London, 3 women showed up to hospitals with the same mysterious symptoms. They say they woke up with these horrible bite marks on the backs of their legs, and then while they're at the hospital, they become paralyzed and die. Despite their similar symptoms, the women had nothing in common except that they had recently been to the same pub. Authorities immediately shut it down and do a thorough search inside of the pub, but can't find anything deadly, until one of the detectives goes to use the pub's bathroom. As he's about to sit down, he thinks he sees something moving in the toilet, so he gives it a little kick. Hiding in the toilet was one of the world's largest and most poisonous spiders, the Brazilian wandering spider, and now they needed to catch it. This is why you should never talk to strangers. In the early 2000s, a young girl was waiting outside her friend's house peeling the bark off of a tree when a strange man approaches her. As he got closer, she could see that he was grinning ear to ear and his face was white as a ghost. He walks right up to her and pinches her on the arm and says, "How would you like it if I peeled your skin off?" Just then, her friend's mom yells for her to come inside and the man walks away. It would be years before the girl's mother would finally tell her who this man really was. Her friend's mom had seen the man pinch her on the arm and had immediately called the police, who quickly rounded this guy up. Plastered all across the inside of his van were dozens of pictures of this girl. But what they found in his storage locker is straight out of a nightmare. In the locker was a chair with hand and arm restraints. Next to it was an anatomy book and hundreds of torture tools. This is why parents should believe their kids. In 2010, a 15-year-old boy started to notice that the door to his attic, which was in his bedroom, was always open. One day, when his mom's giving him a hard time about being lazy, he's like, "Well, you're one to talk. You always leave my attic door open." She's like, "I haven't touched your attic door in months, and nobody else has either." Not easily frightened, the boy decides to leave the attic door open. And so he's laying in bed, and he kind of looks over at the door, and standing in the door frame is a figure staring right at him. He bolts, tells his parents, they don't believe him, and then 6 months later they move anyway. A few years later, the boy discovers his favorite teacher actually moved into his old house, and so he jokingly asks her, "You ever see any ghosts walking around your attic?" Her face got completely serious, and she's like, as soon as we moved in, the door to the attic kept opening, so we investigated and we found a trap door that led onto the roof. Someone had been crawling in through that entrance and living in the attic for years. This is why you should always be afraid of Australia. In 2014, an 8-year-old and her family went on an extended vacation to, you guessed it, Australia. After a couple of days, she started having this horrible recurring nightmare where an alien would appear in her room and try to grab her with its tentacle. After a week of this, she is terrified to go to sleep, but her parents keep telling her that it's just her overactive imagination. One night, she swears she feels that thing grab her leg and she leaps from the bed screaming. Her family runs into the room and they see her hysterical in the corner, and then they look at the bed and they all gasp. It wasn't an alien. It was a 7-foot-long adult carpet python that had been sneaking in through the ceiling tile and into her bed to stay warm every night. Once you hear why he did this, it will change the way you look at strangers. In 2018, a woman was out for a walk in the blistering cold when she saw a teen girl coming towards her wearing just pajamas and oversized shoes. Turns out it was 13-year-old missing person Jamie Close, and boy did she have a terrifying story to tell. 87 days earlier, a man had broken into her home in the middle of the night, killed her parents, and then taken her prisoner. He brought her 70 miles away to his house where she was kept under a bed and largely forgotten about. She was just there for no apparent reason. When her captor left one night, she managed to escape, and that's when she ran into this woman on the road. Jamie's captor, 21-year-old Jake Patterson, was quickly found, and he immediately confessed. And this is why he did it. On his way to work one day, he stops behind a school bus and he sees a girl get on. He doesn't know anything about her, and he decides, I'm going to kill her family and I'm going to take her. He had no motive, he had no criminal history. This was truly random. This is why you should always watch videos to the end. In 2003, a woman came home to her apartment to see that her door was unlocked. She went inside, nothing was missing, so she assumed she must have left it open. When it happened a few more times, but still nothing was missing in her apartment, she went out and got a camera, set it up in her apartment aimed at the front door. The next day, her door was unlocked, so she reviewed the footage. She watches in horror as late in the night, her front door opens and in walks this tall, creepy man who looks around and then walks towards her bedroom off camera. She immediately sprints out of her apartment and calls the police, who show up and tell her to go back in her apartment and just try to stay calm, and that they would put an officer right outside her door so she's safe. As she's sitting on the bed, totally traumatized, she realizes something. She only saw him enter her apartment on that video. She doesn't know if he actually left. As she's sitting there, she feels breathing on her ankles. She runs out, the cop comes in, and he finds the tall, creepy man under the bed holding a knife and a camera.